to college and earned some extra money driving a taxi and selling cash registers, so probably more stories there. Decided to make a better life for himself, went to law school at night while teaching high school in the day. Passing the bar, spent several years practicing law, became a public defender in Los Angeles County, which is probably good for a second book, and eventually worked his way up to chief, where he supervised 400 criminal defense attorneys. In addition, he has been an adjunct professor at UCLA Extension for over 30 years. 2007, graduated from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Academy. I won't get the age. Fulfilling a lifelong dream of becoming a reserve police officer. Shortly thereafter, he was hired as an instructor at the academy. Still doing that?
Yes, still doing it.
Very good. Ken currently resides in Sherman Oaks, California with his wife Maureen. They have a son, Joey, daughter-in-law, Christina, granddaughter, Tasia, and grandson, Nathaniel. So without further ado, let's bring up Ken.
Thank you, Alan, for that kind introduction. I thought nobody would show up tonight because of the Bulls, so I'm impressed. And they're going to win anyway, so what's the difference? I'm Israel Chai. Many of you been to Israel?
Yes.
We just got back. My wife and I just got back. I'm thinking of doing an Aliyah, but we went, we got to Tel Aviv. They took us to Independence Hall, and I sat 10 feet from where Ben Gurion delivered the message of independence. We heard his speech in Hebrew. We heard the rabbi's prayer. And then we stood up and we sang Hatikva, and it wasn't a dry eye in the place. Very, very beautiful. Let me tell you a little bit about this book that I wrote. It's called I'm from Division Street. I'll be selling them in the back afterwards. I'll be happy to sign them for you. It's $10 each. And after my mother died, I was looking through her belongings. By the way, are there any people here who grew up around Humboldt Park?
I was born here.
Where?
When I was born, 909 North Sacramento Boulevard.
I live 5 minutes away. Well, after my mother died, I was looking through her belongings. I was looking through her desk drawer, and I came across, is the mic okay? I came across some old scrapbooks, newspaper articles, memorabilia, and I was stunned to find out how many famous Jewish men lived on my street, Division Street. Some of them lived just blocks from where I lived. Their parents came to Chicago from Eastern Europe with no money and no education. I'm going to read you some of the names, and it'll make you very proud. Barney Ross, one of the greatest Jewish boxers that ever lived. He was the 3-time world champion, and he was a war hero in World War II. Saul Bellow, one of the greatest Jewish authors that ever lived, won the Pulitzer Prize, a prolific author. He lived blocks from where I lived. Studs Terkel, another great Jew, Pulitzer Prize winning author. Art Patek, a famous crime reporter, he won the Pulitzer Prize. Boy, the Jewish guys are something, aren't they? There was a little deli on Division near Spalding, and it was called, in my day, Itzkovitz. And the owner was a man by the name of Sherman Block, who moved to Los Angeles, and he became a sheriff, Jewish sheriff. He was the head guy, and he was one of the most powerful politicians in the state of California. Benny Goodman, the famous band leader, Division Street guy, all Jews. Ben Hecht, famous movie director, lived on my street. Michael Todd, best known for being married to Elizabeth Taylor, famous producer. Jackie Leonard, some of you may remember, the famous comedian. My parents knew him by his street name, Fats Levinsky. Carl Foreman, a famous movie producer. Jules Stein, he established the Jules Stein Eye Clinic at UCLA. And Mickey Rottner, who was in the Jewish Basketball Hall of Fame. Isn't this remarkable? That all these great Jewish men lived on my street. Now, after I found out that all these great guys grew up on my street, I was trying to figure out what there was about them that produced such greatness. What was there about the neighborhood? And I know the answer. Every one of them drank chocolate phosphates. Now, I also grew up with some very great men. Each of them came from humble beginnings. Some of them came from extreme poverty, and all of them became an enormous success. Let me give you a little profile on some of the guys that I grew up with, all Jews. Freddie Rosen, tough guy. If someone, by the way, I'll tell you a little bit later about, I grew up, in my neighborhood was anti-Semitism. Some people got lucky they didn't have it. I had a guy living to my right named Stashu. I had a guy to my left named Genu. So I heard a lot of dirty Jew growing up. But Freddie Rosen, if Freddie Rosen would meet an anti-Semite, look out, because Freddie would show him no mercy. Freddie Rosen's father owned a tiny liquor store on North Avenue. It was the size of a pantry. And Freddie Rosen grew it into the largest retail wine businesses in the United States. Jerry Zaidman, we've been buddies for 65 years. He grew up without a father. His mother was a seamstress. She made minimum wage. They lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. And Jerry Zaidman became a CPA, managing director of one of the largest CPA firms in the United States. He had among his clients the mayor of Chicago, Mayor Burr, and the governor of New York, Hugh Carey. Another guy, Jerry Starkman, we've been buddies 60 years, grew up without a father. His sweet mother, Sally, worked in a factory, minimum wage. They lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. They were so poor that they had to take in boarders, and the boarders slept in the living room. Jerry Starkman became an entrepreneur, very successful businessman. He owns a hot dog stand next door to Northwestern. Some of you may know it. Mustard's last name. Poor kid. Al Ackman. We've been buddies for 60 years. He's one of the finest criminal defendants. Some of you may remember him. He's on TV all the time. One of the best criminal lawyers in Chicago. Constitutional scholar. He's argued before the United States Supreme Court. Some of his briefs have made new law. Another great guy. Al Becker. Al Becker, we've been friends for 60 years. He became an orphan at the age of 16. No mother, no father. He's one of the most prominent attorneys in the city of Chicago. He's listed as super lawyers. Only 2% of the lawyers in this country belong to this esteemed group. They're selected by their peers. Mitch Cohen. His parents were poor people from Russia, Harry and Sarah. Mitch was one of 6 children. They shared 2 bedrooms. He became a CEO of a cosmetic company. Sid Peskin. His father owned a little fruit store on Division Street, and Sid erected a tomato basket on the wall. And when we would come home from high school, we'd shoot hoops into the tomato basket. Sid became an oral surgeon, a full professor of oral surgery at the University of Illinois. Jerry Blumenthal. I've been talking all over Chicago about my book, and one of the venues was Manny's Deli. And so I was there a couple months ago, and in walks a guy who I write about in my book. I hadn't seen him in 50 years. A poor Jewish kid, he lived above a candy store. He became a famous producer. and he produced a documentary called Hoop Dreams. Has anyone seen that? It's one of the best of all time. Siskel and Ebert said it's one of the best. Poor Jewish kid, became very successful. So I decided that I want to write a book, and I want to honor the great Jewish men that came before me and the great Jewish men that I grew up with. And there was one other reason that I decided to write the book. It was my hope that I can help young children who lack self-esteem because I was thrown out of high school. This is a shanta, right? Jewish boy getting thrown out of high school. But I hated school. I don't know why I hated school. My father stressed education, as did my mother. But I wouldn't go. And I was a student at Roosevelt High School in Albany Park, and I was thrown out. And by the way, yesterday morning, I had the great honor of speaking at Roosevelt High School. And I was driving up to the school, and I looked at the marquee, and it said, Ken Green, welcome back. This is a mitzvah. And I went there to pass it on, because I'm very successful. And I want these children to know that anything is possible. And wanted to tell them how I did it, coming from nowhere. So it was a big thrill for me. And here's what happened to me. I was thrown out of high school. My permit was revoked because I lived in Humboldt Park, and all the Jewish kids went to Roosevelt. And so now I had to go to Thule. Thule was a very tough school, and very few Jews went there. And so I was there about 4 months, 5 months, and I called the principal of Roosevelt High School. He was a wonderful guy, and I begged him to take me back. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you can get a B average, if you go to school every day, no tardies, you can come back. So I did it, and I came back. But my grades were so bad, and I wouldn't go to summer school all those years, and it took me 4.5 years to get my high school diploma. And out of 188 people in my class, I had the distinction of being 187, a double shot. So now, here I am, just got my high school diploma, going nowhere, and I had my best friend, Donnie Solomon. And he said to me, we're never going to go to college. Let's go into the Army. And we will be the first 2 Jewish generals. I was so uninformed, I was so uneducated, that I didn't know that to become an officer, you have to go to officer candidate school. So we joined the Army. We were 18 years old. We went in on the buddy system. The buddy system lasted only through basic training. And he was sent to Fort Sam Houston, Texas to be a cook. And I was the only Jew sent to Korea. He lasted about 2 months, and the poor guy got out on a psychiatric discharge. I went to Korea, and by the way, when I went to Korea, I experienced more anti-Semitism because as I arrived at my new base, I was in a truck, and the truck took me up the side of a mountain, and my outfit was right near the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and the truck driver pointed to a Quonset hut, looked like it was made out of corrugated tin. There was no water. To drink water, we'd have to put a pill in the polluted stream. There was no electricity. And he said, this is where you live. So I got out of the truck, I had my duffel bag, and I walked in. It was a Sunday. There were no officers, there were no non-commissioned officers. There were about 8 guys inside of this Quonset hut. And so I saw an empty bunk, and I got up on, it was an upper, and I got up on the bunk, and I was reading a magazine that I bought in Tokyo. And within about 5 minutes, for those of you who saw the movie Deliverance, have you seen that movie? Within 5 minutes, the guy who looked like the star walked up to me. And he had a big bull neck. I weighed 150 pounds. He was about 6'2", 230. His eyes looked like